Silence gives us all kinds of amazing things. It gives us space for listening. It lets space for listening to other people and space for us to listen to ourselves.
Happy Friday. I'm Michael Kovnat, and this is the Next Big Idea Daily, quick life lessons from the best new nonfiction. Now, we live in a world overflowing with ways to connect. Texts, DMs, Zooms, you name it. But somehow, it feels harder than ever to have a truly meaningful conversation. Fred Dust wants to change that. A longtime partner at the design firm IDEO, Fred has spent his career helping people and organizations talk and listen more effectively. In his 2020 book, Making Conversation, he shares 7 essential elements of meaningful communication, from the power of silence to the art of naming what really matters. Former Surgeon General Vivek Murthy says the book is essential reading for those looking to enrich their relationships and build community. Here's Fred to share his big ideas.
Hi, I'm Fred Dust, former global managing director of the design firm IDEO. I'm also the author of Making Conversation, 7 Essential Elements of Meaningful Communications, as well as board member at National Public Radio, Sundance Institute, and the chair of the board of Parsons. I believe that making conversation is one of the most important things that we can do in our lives, and I've been doing it for a long, long time, whether it's been with world leaders, Fortune 500 CEOs, rural healthcare workers in India, Peruvian farmers, prime ministers, activists of all sorts, creatives, designers, playwrights, filmmakers, and even my mother. So now, without any ado, I'm going to share the 5 key insights from Making Conversation. The history of humanity is one long conversation. And by the way, we're still having it. We were in conversation before we had words. We were in conversation through hand signals that helped us hunt. We were in conversations with different species that allowed us to both be predator, but also to farm the land. We've always been in conversation, even if we don't believe it. The meta level, I think the important thing here is that we don't make assumptions about what a conversation is or what a conversation isn't. Many things are conversations that we might not realize are conversations. And to get really specific, we've never lost the ability to have a conversation. It's actually a very useful myth for politicians, and it's a super exciting news hook for all kinds of news medias. So it'll get eyes, but it's false. We're good at conversations, and we always have been. And one last thing, it's not our phones that started the decay of conversations in the world. That happened well before. I think that happened in the 50s when we started introducing television into the dinner time, or God forbid, television into the bedroom. Really consider what the role of technology is in your life. We have some of the most sophisticated and hard conversations ever through technology right now. You can have a good conversation through text, believe it or not. One of the most historic and best forms of conversation was the pilgrimage, where we would actually walk side by side together to visit a holy site or some destination. That's actually the premise of the idea of holidays, is the holy days we used to do when we would actually take those walks. So think of ourselves as being on pilgrimage together right now. We're all walking together into the light, and we need to be in conversation. Silence is an essential component to conversation. That may seem counterintuitive to you. Like, a lot of you will kind of think about awkward silence or moments where things feel strange because nobody's saying anything. But silence gives us all kinds of amazing things. It gives us space for listening. It lets space for listening to other people and space for us to listen to ourselves. Think about pausing for a moment when somebody says something and really reflect on how that made you feel. Silence can really be a powerful tool. When I attended a Quaker meeting to kind of understand Quaker listening, one of the things that I learned was that the Quakers sort of say, hey, if God has been talking, they've always been talking through us, which is one of the reasons why Quakers allow anyone to have testimony, is because they believe that God can talk through anybody. And honestly, not only do I believe that that's true, and I had a really remarkable experience when I went to the Quaker ceremony, but The psychology of creativity suggests that silence actually helps fire connections in our brains, things that we might not make otherwise, and allows us to kind of develop new ideas or combine things into amazing new ideas. So there's a lot that suggests that silence is really good for us. It's actually one of the reasons we often have our greatest ideas while we're taking quiet walks or while we're in the shower, for instance, is those are moments of silence where we're listening to ourselves and finding new connections. Get good at naming. Names really matter. You wouldn't put your kid out into the world without naming them, or maybe you would, but you might think differently about that. The reality is that by naming your child, you're naming the intention that you have for that child in the world. It's actually why, at least in Christian cultures, we don't have that many Cains or Abels. Those aren't the names we necessarily want our children to be carrying. So, in the same way that you would name your child, think about naming the things that really matter to you, the love you have for somebody, or naming an idea that really matters. And really good names have strong visual components to them. They allow you to see what they're describing. So, I really recommend that you get thoughtful about the language you're using. One place to go look for inspiration is the language of wine. Maybe some people might know the real language of wine, but I'm talking about languages that are like plummy or earthy, things that start to kind of evoke not just what things might look like, but what they might taste like or feel like. I've got even other examples where people have used pop celebrities to describe wine. So, what do you think Shawn Mendes tastes like, or Lil Nas, or Taylor Swift? I don't know. You might want to think about that. We first sort of really thought about this. Well, that's not true. I thought about this when I was an architect, but when we were in healthcare and recognized that about half the people in an emergency room didn't know what the word triage was. By the way, that comes from the French of sifting wheat and was used in World War I in trench warfare to understand who was going to die and who wasn't, or who might survive, so that you could actually get them the care they needed. That's a great word to use if you're a healthcare professional talking to a healthcare professional. It's not so great if you don't know what the word means, which is a lot of people. So really think about where the words show up and how you use them. But also beware of names that are labeling or can be misleading. Politicians are really good at using these kinds of names. Anti-maskers, for instance, there's no more insight on that in the name. The name doesn't give you a sense of what an anti-masker is. It does a great visual, but we can't say if an anti-masker is not masking for one reason or another, and we really shouldn't be assuming. This is the same with a religious woman in Salt Lake City, which you might imagine is a Mormon, but may not be. And so while you think that's descriptive, it may not be descriptive enough to get you the insight about the person you need. So go behind the labels and think about new ways of understanding who people really are. Notice change. So I live on a farm where I walk our land almost every day. And when you do that, you notice subtle changes in the landscape that you wouldn't notice otherwise. Sometimes the landscape has shifted subtly from yellow to bluish yellow, from bluish yellow to green, or right now, unfortunately, to really, really, really white because it's very cold outside. But the important thing is that you notice the change in the world around you. Likewise, when you're making and creating conversations, really be good at noticing when a change has happened in that conversation. People who are good at noticing change can help conversations move forward and help us make better conversations. So in my research, I came across a woman who was a religious woman in Salt Lake City who was really good at seeing when change happened in a conversation. To be frank, when she and her friends read 50 Shades of Grey, they stopped and they were like, wait a second, we've changed. We're different people. And that let them move forward so they could get more and more sophisticated about their thinking about sex, sex identities, sexual roles in America and beyond, and really allowed them to kind of make change in the world. At a more spectacular and perhaps death-defying level, I created a mechanism called creative tensions, which allowed people to kind of move back and forth across the room to express how they felt about certain polemics or things that seemed in opposition with each other. I did one with NYCLU in Brooklyn that was with victims of police and the police themselves, as well as civic leaders, other people as well. It was a large kind of basketball arena setting. Change that happened there was spectacular. When I put up the tension, When I'm around police, I feel safe or afraid. Most of the room moved towards safe, except for one black woman who'd lost her son to a police officer and one black police officer who had 3 sons. And that moment was a moment of extreme and utter change. And all we could do was stop and say, something happened. We've changed. When in doubt, make. And by the way, this kind of goes full circle right back to the beginning, which I think many elegant things should. I'm not saying this is elegant. But in the same way we talked about how maybe even pre-verbal societies were able to communicate, when you're in conversation working side by side with your mom under the hood of a car or quilting with your dad, you are connecting in ways that you never might when you're speaking. And it's totally fine to actually just be doing together and understanding that making is one of the most important things we do in our lives. Finally, for many of us who wouldn't kind of qualify or think of ourselves as anything but introverted or somewhat nervous about making conversation, you might think about just going for a walk with someone side by side. That works if you're a leader. That works if you're going on a date, to be honest. I have an unverified quote about Golda Meir that she was good at inviting people into the kitchen, which meant that she would actually be cooking with leaders as she was having conversations. I have no evidence of that, but I kind of believe it. So why not? Think about just silently making with someone.
Thank you, Fred. Okay, listeners, you can get yourself a copy of Making Conversation using the link in the episode notes. If you got something out of today's show, please leave us a 5-star rating and a glowing review to help others find it. That does it for us this week. These episodes were written by me, Michael Kovnat, and edited by Caleb Bissinger. We'll see you Monday.